Joining me now for his first interview since leaving the White House last summer is President Trump's first Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. Mr. Priebus, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be back.
All right, let me start right on an issue that happened near the end of your tenure as White House Chief of Staff. The Washington Post reported late last month the following. Trump's ire at Mueller rose to such a level that then White House strategist Stephen K. Bannon and then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus grew, quote, incredibly concerned that he was going to fire Mueller and sought to enlist others to intervene with the president, according to a Trump advisor who requested anonymity to describe private conversations. This was all in that report that said White House counsel Don McGahn said he'd resign if ordered to do this. What can you tell us about this event?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's an ongoing investigation, so there's some things that I can't get into, Chuck. But I will tell you this, which I think is something that I've talked to a couple people about. I never felt, of all the things that we went through in the West Wing, I never felt that the president was going to fire the special counsel. So I never felt the level of the level 10
and what people heard. It's possible the president uttered the words, "I want Mueller fired. I want Mueller gone."
I never heard
that. But you
that.
Never took it.
No, I never heard that.
You never heard those specifics.
I never heard that.
The sentiment was expressed?
I think it was very clear by the president's own words that he was concerned about the conflicts of interest that he felt that the special counsel had, and he made that very clear. Perhaps someone interpreted that to mean something else, but I know the difference between fire that person, why isn't that person gone, to what I read in that New York Times piece. So when I read that, I'm just telling you, I didn't feel that when I was there.
Did Don McGahn express that concern?
Not in particular, but again,
is this
there's
story
certain
wrong?
I didn't think it was right. I mean, put it that way. I mean, I didn't believe that it was. I didn't believe it was accurate.
But you're not ready to. You're not disputing it in total.
I'm disputing it from my point of view.
From your point of view, but
because I never heard that.
You never heard it, but you're not.
Right.
It's possible he did express this.
I think he expressed his concerns with the conflicts, but I never heard the idea or the concept that this person needed to be fired. I never felt that it was relayed to me that way either, and I would know the difference between a level 10 situation as reported in that story and what was reality. And it just, to me, it wasn't reality.
Do you see a president preparing to fire Robert Mueller right now?
No.
You don't?
Not at all.
This is all people...
I think it's news. I think it's a 24/7 obsession with this issue. Listen, it's a legitimate issue that the president and all of his supporters, at least the ones that go on television, reiterate and saying they want to cooperate with the special counsel. They're not going to get in the way. And I've not heard anything to the contrary of that mantra.
You've spoken with Mr. Mueller. That's been widely reported, and I'm not going to ask you about what you've told Mr. Mueller.
I cannot do.
Totally understand that. But if the president asked you, should I go before? Should I go before Robert Mueller? What would you tell him?
I'm going to let his lawyers deal with it.
His allies say it's a perjury trap for him.
His lawyers will deal with that. I mean, there are certain things that I just don't know. I mean, even though I was chief of staff, it doesn't mean that I know every single thing that his lawyers are dealing with. I only know what I dealt with. And I can just tell you, I've never felt that there was some sort of collusion or some kind of obstruction situation going on in the West Wing. I never felt that. And if there was ever anything at all that caused me any concern, I would go to the White House counsel's office, we would talk about it, and it would get resolved.
Let me ask you another event in and around that time also, which was the report about the Trump Tower meeting between Donald Trump Jr., members of the campaign team at the time, and the response to it. What the meeting was. Here's what you said the meeting was the day after the report on Fox News Sunday. Just hang on.
It was a very short meeting. It was a meeting apparently about Russian adoption. And after about 20 minutes, the meeting ended, and that was the end of it. I don't know much about it other than it seems to be on the end of the Trump individual. It's a big nothing burger.
All right. You were not on the Air Force One when that statement was dictated. We now learned the next day that it was not about Russian adoptions. At the initial meeting, we had the emails from Donald Trump Jr. Who told you the adoption story?
That's what I've always heard. I mean, I heard that from from members of the family. I heard that it was another
So when you were
meeting.
preparing to go on that show, and you asked, okay, what should I know about this meeting?
Well, quite
Members of
frankly,
the family told you Russian adoption?
That's all I ever heard that it was about. And in fact, I still believe what I said in that clip, in that, in fact, it was a meeting about Russian adoption in this thing called the Majinsky Act that I'd never heard of. I've never heard it was anything but that. But again, Chuck, I don't know. I wasn't there. I was chairman of the
Did you feel
RNC.
misled that reading the next day that
Not
you
as
find
of
out the
now.
email that Donald Trump Jr. Thought the meeting was going to be about Hillary Clinton dirt?
No, not really, because I think in the end, the people involved, at least this is my assertion, that the people involved truly believed that it was a nothing meeting, totally about these issues of Russian adoption. Now, I don't know what the motivations were, okay? So I only know what I know. I wasn't on the plane. I was not involved in that meeting.
Do you know if the president was involved with the drafting of the statement or not?
I do not.
So it was just other people informing you of this is what you should know about this meeting.
That's right. And when you go on to that Sunday show that morning, you know, I think it was the only Sunday show that morning that actually talked about that New York Times article.
And it asked you about it.
No, right. I mean, if you go back and look at every single Sunday show, that was the only one that actually discussed it. But look, like all of this, Chuck, and I can't get too much into it, and I've allowed some of this to go on just to be fair with you, but I never felt that I was involved in something nefarious the whole way through, from the beginning to the end. So you can understand the frustration of the president when he's told he's not under investigation. Right. I think you know the story of Andrew McCabe that walked into my office, shut my door, and basically told me that the New York Times story that was in the paper that first came out in February that said there are constant contacts between the Trump campaign and the Russians, with the door closed, looked at me and said, I want you to know that this story right here is total BS. It's overstated, and it's not true. This is the deputy director of the FBI. I didn't know who he was. Right. It's the middle of February. And so everyone's in this world where we're being told one thing and sort of operating in this other world of constant obsession by the media.
I understand. Let me one more question about one more event that has been unclear, which is the Michael Flynn situation and the issue with sanctions. We now know a little bit more. You had said at the time, you know, you had asked Mike Flynn. He did not. That he basically misled you, and didn't tell you that his conversations with the Russian ambassador were that. You were the recipient of emails from KT McFarland and forwarded emails, I think, from Tom Bossert during the transition that did hint that a conversation that Flynn had. Now, it's very possible you didn't read these emails. Nobody knows. Did you know, when did you know that Michael Flynn did speak to the Russians about the sanctions issues? When did you find that out?
Well, I can't really get into all of that because some of that is classified. What I can tell you is that there was never a time from the moment that this issue came up until the moment that we discovered that it wasn't necessarily true. There was never a time that Michael Flynn denied it. In other words, every time Michael Flynn was confronted with the question of did you or did you not talk about sanctions, he denied it. And he denied it over and over and over again.
In fact, there was one, in fact, the president's lawyer said the following, this is the New York Times, that Mr. Cobb said that Mr. Trump did not know that Mr. Flynn had discussed sanctions with Mr. Kislyak in the call. After the inauguration, he said, quote, Flynn specifically denied it to him in the presence of witnesses. Were you one of those witnesses? Where Flynn denied talking to the Russians on sanctions to the president?
What do you mean? I don't know, but I don't remember anything about in front of the president, but I can tell you, to me, certainly, it was something that he always denied up until the end. And here's the thing, Chuck, if General Flynn would have simply said, wait a second, you know what, I actually did. Or, hey, hold on, maybe we did talk about this. Or, hey, don't you remember we had an email that may have hinted? None of that happened. Because if it did happen, then it would have simply been, okay, is what you did right or wrong? Okay, if it's wrong, what are we going to do about it? Is it something that we can correct?
What you're saying is you might have been willing to defend it had he been forthcoming?
Or say there was nothing wrong with it. I mean, we never got to that matrix because it was always a denial. So it necessarily didn't have to get to the point of 12 denials.
All right.
And I've talked about this before, which is why I'm comfortable talking about it with you right now.
All right. I want to ask you about the relationship you have with the president.
You bet.
Because Steve Bannon shared this anecdote about you and candidate Trump after the Access Hollywood tape. Here it is.
Oh, yes.
And Trump went around the room and asked people the percentages he thought of still winning and what the recommendation. And Reince started off, and Reince said, you have two choices. You either drop out right now or you'll lose by the biggest landslide in American political history.
An anonymous friend of the president said this about you, said Trump had long questioned the depth of Priebus's loyalty. The senior official described Priebus's counsel that day as a, quote, stain he was never going to remove, the scarlet AH. How often did he, I've heard this about the president, not just with you, that he finds a moment that he didn't like advice, and this is with any advisor, and he brings it up all the time. Is this something he'd bring up to you a lot?
He brought it up occasionally, but he also follows it up with the fact that, you know, that day and the next day, I was the guy on the plane playing both the moderator and Hillary Clinton, preparing the president for that second debate. The other thing I'd say is that no one in the room disagreed with what I was saying either. I mean, so it's one of those things where
they're hanging it on you.
People behind the scenes bring this issue up, but none of them spoke up and said, "Oh, that's wrong." I mean, the truth of the matter is, I was making a point to the president.
You thought
this
it was
a serious
brave.
issue,
Yeah.
and that we had to do everything that we could do to turn this campaign around, get ready for the second debate, apologize for what happened, and move forward. And in fact, that's exactly what he did. I mean, he turned that second debate around and then went on a 3-week, 5-speech-a-day disciplined campaign and won the operation. And look, if I didn't believe in the president, I wouldn't have transferred the millions of more dollars that were put into his campaign and the field and data operation to boot.
Where did the Condi Rice, Mike Pence
Yeah, I have no idea. It's not true. And others in that circle, when that story came out, we all talked to each other and said, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. And so it's one of those fake news items, you could say.
Let me ask you about immigration. The infamous autopsy report of the RNC in 2013 said the following: we must embrace and champion comprehensive immigration reform. If we do not, our party's appeal will continue to shrink to its core constituencies only. March 2013. Obviously, on one hand, politically, Republicans, House, Senate, the presidency. But the problem with Hispanics is worse today for the Republican Party than it was in 2013. Do you think the president's making a mistake by not following your advice on this?
Well, I don't know about that. I think he is following advice. I think that if you look at what's happening in the economy, and you look at the tax cuts, you look at unemployment, I think those things matter a lot. I actually think he is doing better. I think he did better with black voters and Hispanic voters in the election. I think we can do more. I don't think anything in the autopsy is wrong. I think the president's position that he's taking on the Dreamers and DACA is very bold. I think he's boxed the Democrats in on that issue. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to walk away from. He's giving more than I probably would have given in the same as advice to him, but I also think it's clever of him to offer far more on DACA than what most Republicans would have offered, because I think it boxes everyone else in, and so I think it's very smart.
All right. Final question for you. Paul Ryan's a close friend of yours, Speaker of the House. He will not say whether he's running for re-election. Why?
I think it's something he needs to talk to his wife about in the spring and make a decision. It's what they always do, and I think that's what he's going to do. But I do think that Paul's view of what fundamentally is getting accomplished under President Trump, when you look at tax cuts, you look at ISIS, you look at the courts, which is a historical record, when you look at regulation and what the president's done, you take away what the media wants to focus in on, which is the decision-making process and some of the drama, but you actually look at what decisions are being made and the fundamentals. The president's doing a remarkable job.
So does Ryan think he can retire? That he's mission accomplished?
Because my point is he's accomplishing the things that he's worked since he was 21 on. They're happening now under President Trump. And as wild as that ride has been, both for Paul Ryan and people like myself, you cannot escape the fact that the president is doing a remarkable job on the fundamentals of what being president is all about.
Reince Priebus, former chief of staff. I'm going to leave it there.
You bet.
Appreciate you coming on, sharing your views. Hope to see you again soon. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here. and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.